Hi there, I'm Natasha Zouves. Former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio thinks Democrats could have won in 2024 and they blew it. He talks about whether he thinks Kamala Harris should run again and who on the Democrats' bench he's most excited about going forward. He also talks about when it comes to Trump's tariffs and Elon Musk, he thinks the Democrats have an opportunity. Here's our conversation. Mayor Bill de Blasio, welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Natasha. Happy to be here.
So much to talk about. I just want to start quickly looking forward to 2028. Do you believe that Kamala Harris should step aside for a stronger candidate?
I think it's going to be really tough if she wanted to be the candidate. I think there's a lot of people who feel that that campaign was not all it should have been. And I grant you, she had to jump in at the last moment, and her start of her campaign was, I think, fantastic. But toward the end, there was a lack of connection and sort of empathy with the American people. So I think there's not going to be a ton of appetite, honestly.
Yeah, Mayor, are you one of those people?
I have concerns. Again, having been a candidate for president, that didn't quite work out. But having been a candidate for president, I don't tend to, at this point, editorialize who should or shouldn't. But I do like to be honest about who I think is, in better shape or not. I think there are candidates who certainly could come in fresh and be in a stronger position.
You believe Democrats could have won in 2024. What went wrong?
I think when you look at the numbers, let's just start with the why we could have won. The numbers say it all. One of the closest counts in the House of Representatives in terms of the number of seats we've seen in history. The Electoral College, you're talking about literally if you move a few 100,000 votes over to the Democratic side in the three key battleground states, she wins. This was not the wipeout, massive mandate election that Trump and his allies portray. Now, I was out in Michigan a lot during the campaign, surrogating for Kamala Harris. And I will just tell you, we left a ton of votes on the table, particularly in Metro Detroit. This is one of the stories of the entire election. Why did folks in Wayne County, Michigan, not turn out to vote who had turned out before? They didn't feel inspired. They didn't feel the Democratic Party was speaking to them. They didn't feel we were fighting for them. So I think we could have brought out a lot of votes that stayed home. I think we could have flipped a lot of people who were on the fence. There were a lot of people voting out of real economic frustration over inflation, but they weren't dyed-in-the-wool Trump voters. We could have won them over if we spoke to them.
Where was the failure to connect ultimately?
I think it all came down to one moment, and I don't want to overstate it, but if you want the summary moment, it was the interview that Kamala Harris did on The View, where she was asked what she would do different from Joe Biden, and she really
You really think that lost it for her?
I don't think it literally that moment. I think it was the sort of exemplar of what went wrong. And I think that moment was the crystallization, and a lot of people saw it. So do I think one interview ruined the election? No. I think it summarized what was wrong. And by the way, massive historical parallel. 1968, Lyndon Johnson pulls back his candidacy, just like Joe Biden. Hubert Humphrey becomes nominee last minute, just like Kamala Harris. Hubert Humphrey won't speak out against Johnson on the Vietnam War. And a lot of people stayed home, and a lot of people are alienated. Kamala Harris needed to say, this economy is not where it needs to be. People are hurting. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And the border's not where it needs to be. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And that could have made all the difference, honestly.
So you don't think it's necessarily that she had to appear disloyal or completely throw him under the bus, but she needed to show some willingness, some awareness that people were looking for something different?
Yeah, I don't think it's disloyal to say, hey, we tried some things, we didn't get as far as we needed to go, or we need to take a different direction. That thing didn't work. I actually think the public respects, for example, the border. I'm a progressive. I respect immigrants and immigration, but the border was chaotic. And who likes chaos, and who likes to see a situation that doesn't feel like there's any rules in effect, right? So I think as a Democrat, it's perfectly comfortable to say, we didn't handle that right. Let's just accept we didn't handle it right. We need to do better. Here's how we're going to do better.
We're seeing headlines now that former President Biden believes that he could have won in a matchup against Trump.
No, I look, I have immense respect for what he did as president. I think this is the irony of Joe Biden. I mean, he, to me, did an incredible public service to come out of retirement, run in 2020 and win, and then had an extremely successful presidency. He's going to rank up there with some of the greats, I think, honestly. But politically, it was no longer tenable, even by the beginning of 2024. Now, I take responsibility in my own small way. Every single one of us who tried to look the other way and sort of hope against hope that he was up to another 4 years, it would have been so much healthier if we said, you did an incredible job, Mr. President, but it's time to pack it in and let the next generation step forward. But we all deferred too much. And I'm putting myself in that group too. I think there were so many warning signs, and we just kept thinking like maybe this will be okay. And then that debate happened and proved, our worst fears.
What do you wish you would have done?
Look, there were a small number of people, I count among them David Axelrod and David Ignatius, who said out loud, keep the commitment you made, Mr. President. You said you were going to be a positive transitional figure. You said it would be one term, keep to that. Now, by the way, you don't do that too early if you're Joe Biden. You never want to be a lame duck. Maybe that's something he does after the 2022 elections, which, by the way, were relatively successful for Democrats. I understand why he felt good about that. Maybe you do it at the end of 2023. But I think if more of us had said, we are seeing the public say that they're not comfortable, including a lot of people who would like to vote Democratic. And I think it's a cautionary tale. I think it's time to recognize that all the old rules are kind of out the window right now. And that kind of notion of, party loyalty, hold the line, don't speak up, is kind of bankrupt. It always was on one level, but it's particularly bankrupt now. The Republicans are finding that out the hard way, by the way, right now on the tariff issue. So I just think it would have been healthy if people said, hey, you've been a great president, but we have more chance to win with fresh horses.
How was election night for you? Were you surprised by the results?
No, I had been out in Michigan, in all parts of Michigan, talking to people, seeing what was happening on the ground.
You saw it coming.
Yeah, I mean, the polling also told us it was a possibility. But yes, I saw it coming because the Republicans did a great job with their message, and they also did a great job getting their people to stand up. I mean, literally, when I go around Michigan, I'd see all the Trump signs. The final vote in Michigan was super close, but you didn't see the Kamala Harris signs everywhere. I'm not trying to say the world comes down to yard signs. I'm saying we need to invigorate our people to be just as tough and just as ready to fight. And there are Democrats all over the country, including in red counties, who fight every day and stand up and get their message out. But the party has to do that much more consistently. We have to excite people. And you excite people by helping them understand what you're going to do differently for them.
Why are Democrats so bad at messaging?
I think it's a very big tent party. I mean, even going back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was our greatest president, in my view, and our greatest messenger ever, and helped bring the American people out of the Depression in large measure through his vision and his voice. But he also created a very big tent party in the process. And it's understandable that in that big tent party, it's kind of, you're walking on eggshells a little bit sometimes, trying to keep all the different pieces together. But I think sort of a bit of a pathology developed out of that, of fear of sharp, clear messages. And I think that got amplified by the donor class, the consultant class in Washington, the folks who were not necessarily interested in us being as bluntly the party of working people. If you go back and look at FDR's rhetoric, he was unashamed to say what he was doing was for working people, was for labor unions, not for the wealthy. That's more pertinent today. We have the biggest income inequality we've ever had in this history in this country. That kind of approach is more pertinent. So big tent, but the real problem is not the big tent. The real problem is letting elites do the talking when, in fact, they can never help us win an election.
What do Democrats need to do now? What position do they find themselves in?
A position where we can and will rebuild. I mean, it's already happening. It's fascinating what a difference a month makes. A month ago, everyone was wringing their hands and, honestly being a little wimpish. Now we had, protests in 1,200 different American cities and towns last Saturday against what Trump is doing. Republican members of Congress can't even hold town hall meetings because there's so much opposition to them in their districts. The polling shows the American people have radically gone against Trump on the tariff issue by a margin of 20%. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are going around the country getting record-sized rally crowds. I mean, that's a lot of evidence in just a few short weeks that the tables have now been turned. I think it's great what Ken Martin is doing, the new Democratic National Committee chair, in terms of really going out to the people at the grassroots, rebuilding state Democratic parties and local parties to fight back in 2026. I see a lot. And I think we're actually in a position now to take full advantage of the extremism of Trump. I mean, this is the thing to remember. Americans are not extremists. Trump did a really good job of portraying Democrats as extremists on a variety of issues. I think unfairly, but he did a good job of painting a picture. Well, now Democrats can turn the tables on Trump.
Interesting. So you think Democrats have a clear opportunity to paint Trump and his followers as the ones who are extreme. In what way do you believe that Trump is extreme?
Well, first of all, the tariffs are causing global chaos already, and people have lost their jobs right this moment. They've already lost their jobs because of this tariffs. Businesses are already being debilitated, especially small businesses around this country. They don't know what to do. They can't make a decision of this instability. And so Donald Trump did that single-handedly. He used to complain about Biden and the economy, except now he owns this economy. So right away, people like, what? Why did you have to do something so extreme so quick? Americans are smart. They're figuring that one out. Obviously, the fact that now people know Social Security and Medicare may be in danger. Veterans Administration has been decimated. National Weather Service has been decimated. That these are parts of the American mainstream that now Donald Trump and Elon Musk have taken a sledgehammer to. I mean, this is not going to sit well with the American people.
And let's talk more about tariffs. I mean, from where we're sitting right now, almost end of the day on Thursday, Trump has done a complete reversal after saying that he wouldn't. He has paused most of the tariffs on most countries, except for China. We still have this 145% tariff. What is your concern at this point?
Well, prices are going to go up unquestionably. And this is on top of all the inflation that people have already suffered through, because China is where so many of our goods come from. And at minimum, what this is doing is just freezing everything in place. I mean, I've talked to business people who say, we're not going to make a move until we know where all this is going. And, the cost could be going up to the extreme. So the chaos alone is going to drive up costs, is going to make items less available. People are going to feel it. That's why we just saw a Reuters poll yesterday. 73% of the American people assume prices are about to go up because of Trump's policies. The guy, in theory, they sent there to address the inflation issue. And now you've got a super majority, including 25% of Republicans, who are saying, wait a minute, this guy's actually going to make it worse. So
What
right
would you
there.
say to those who say, Trump himself says we need to take medicine before we're going to get better? Short-term pain here. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in this medicine. He has not presented as Donald Trump doesn't present coherent plans. That's not what he does. You'll remember famously when he was asked what he was going to do about healthcare, and he said he had a concept of plan. We've never seen a plan in 10 years on healthcare for Donald Trump. We've never seen a plan on how to fix our trade deficit. This is a radical kind of shot in the dark, suddenly throwing out these tariffs, then pulling them back. By the way, what kind of bargaining position is that? If your bargaining partner thinks you're weak or thinks you might change any moment now, that doesn't exactly suggest a tough hand in negotiations. So I think what he's done is he's actually presented America as kind of out of control right now. And it's not strengthening our hand. In fact, it's strengthening China's hand. This is the blunt truth right now. The winner right now in this is China, because they want to become the global dominant voice and leader in terms of trade. And the rest of the world looking at American chaos. China's seems stable comparatively. So this is more than ironic that what he's doing is actually undercutting the possibility of addressing that trade imbalance. I'd like to address that imbalance. I'd like more manufacturing back in the United States. Show me an actual plan to get there rather than a bunch of stray, radical, on again, off again actions.
And yet Trump would say, look, more than 50 countries, 75 countries have come to the negotiating table who weren't willing to speak with us before. Mayor, what would you say to those who say this is Trump's art of the deal? We have to let him do what he does best.
Show me where that has worked in the past. What does he achieve? What did he achieve in his last presidency? He gave massive tax cuts to billionaires and millionaires and corporations. He took away a woman's right to choose. Let's go down the list. He fumbled the COVID crisis and made it much worse and much longer than it could have been if it was handled professionally from the beginning. So where is this example of the art of the deal working for us? My view is he uses chaos as a way to advantage himself politically. It does not result in policy wins for the American people or better outcomes for the American people. Where's there the evidence of that? And by the way, these countries, they're placating him. They say they're going to make a deal. He ain't got any deals right now. They may come to the table, but he's got nothing to show for it.
Mayor, what would you say to the many Americans who believe that they were better off under Trump's presidency than Biden's presidency, and that's why they voted for him again?
Well, I agree that before the pandemic, life was better than during the pandemic. I mean, I think this is a lot of what happened in this last election, too. And again, I think we could have won it, but let's be fair. Joe Biden inherited a pandemic, and a lot of how people saw his presidency was through that prism, the pain they were still going through because of the pandemic, the inflation after. Some of that could have been perhaps handled better at the beginning by Biden, but a lot of that was global supply chain and other issues that went far beyond the president that were about the pandemic. So the American people put Biden in that pandemic category, thought of Trump as the guy from before the pandemic. I get that.
Mm.
Who wouldn't have wanted to go back to the time before the pandemic? But in the end, if it's true that people said, well, maybe Trump will handle inflation better, for example, they've literally now decided after less than 100 days that that's not true. They've actually decided he hasn't handled it better, and the numbers prove it.
If the economy tanks, is that ultimately a good thing for the Democratic Party?
No. I mean, the economy, see, I know there are people out there strategically are like, oh, let's hope for the worst, and, then we'll look good. I mean, I don't find that particularly patriotic, nor do I find it productive. We want our fellow Americans to do well, especially people who've been hurting for so long. I don't think that's how we win the election. I think we win the election because in 26 and in 28, because people do not want to see extremism and division. They were so much in pain. I think we've underestimated how much the pandemic itself left people in real emotional pain, so much loss in so many ways in people's lives. They were struggling to find some kind of answer to that, to the inflation, to the sense of chaos in the world. Ironically, a lot of that chaos created by Donald Trump over the last 10 years. And so they look for change. Well, I guarantee you they're going to look for change again. It should not be about a collapsed economy. They're going to look for change because they don't want extremism. They don't want this constant instability. They don't want division and hatred. They really don't. That's not the nature of Americans. So I think, now it's like, careful, that famous phrase, be careful what you wish for. People got their election choice. Now they're actually seeing it and they're like, what the hell? This is not what we voted for. That's what I think is going to be the clear idea that animates, especially the 2026 midterm election. A whole lot of working people are hurting. And that's the big story, not just of the last 10 years, but for decades. Working people have felt that they were going backwards, that they weren't gaining ground, that they were actually losing their hold on the middle class, and that their kids were going to do worse. Democrats
And Democrats have always been the party of the working people.
Right.
What happened?
I think Democrats and Republicans both contributed to the mistakes that have led to this sense of desperation and the feeling that people have that they're not even treading water, that they're losing ground, that things are so insecure. Both parties bear some blame for that, no question. But what the Republicans have done very effectively is try to demonize the Democrats on social issues and cultural issues and failed to note, who gave the tax breaks overwhelmingly to the millionaires and billionaires and corporations? That was the Republicans. That wasn't Democrats. Who created an economy, where Wall Street made out like bandits and working people were struggling? That was first and foremost Republicans. Democrats need to go back to straight up kitchen table economics. So I'm not saying the cultural issues don't matter. I mean, I'll say pound for pound, we should win on the cultural issues. A woman's right to choose, that's a strong majority position in America. Real responsible gun safety laws, that's a strong majority position in America. So the Republicans have created an atmosphere that's like, oh, you're being attacked culturally because you're a straight white man. That's just not true, first of all. But second of all, Democrats need to get up off the mat, go back to the things that actually a whole lot of straight white men want to talk about, like the fact that their wages are not good enough, like the fact that their tax breaks are being given away to folks who are already wealthy. These are things that actually energize a lot of straight white men and people across the board to see the difference between the parties. We, in my view, became too captive to some of our elites, our donors, our consultants. We stopped saying that kind of strong, clear, progressive economic message. Why do you think Bernie and AOC are getting these massive crowds? Because they're actually saying something. And a lot of those people, by the way, and Joe Rogan is a classic example of this, who was originally a Bernie Sanders supporter. A lot of people who are upset about the status quo in America. They can be pulled back to the Democratic side if Democrats stand for something.
What did you learn from your presidential run that you would do differently another time around?
Oh, I learned so many things, but the first thing I would say is there is a hunger out there for just straight talk, just really laying out things are not what they're supposed to be. The status quo is broken. This is not the American promise that was made to us. And I think being blunt about it is exactly what people want to hear. I think being bold, people want to not just think folks are nibbling around the edges, but actually be bold about what we need to do differently. But I also learned a very positive lesson, Natasha. I spent time in communities all over the country, and what I found was people did not like the division one bit. They actually wanted to get along with each other. They didn't see the person of another party as their enemy. That's a Washington thing. If you're in Dubuque, Iowa, Democrats and Republicans work next to each other at the factory, or go to the same bowling alley or whatever it is. They are not at loggerheads with each other.
Would you consider running for president again?
I think that is not my mission. Thank you for asking, but I want to contribute to ensuring that we have a candidate who really speaks to these economic issues and this bluntly retakes the position, that goes out there and says Democratic Party will be the party of the working class again. We're going to put the lie to this idea that Republicans could possibly be that. We're the party of labor unions. We're the party that stands up for the little guy. I want to make sure we do that right in 2026 and 2028.
The last time we spoke, you said that the Democrats have a deep bench and you are confident for 2028. Who are you most excited about?
I don't have a candidate yet, but I'll tell you some of the people who I think are shining right now. I look at Governor Wes Moore in Maryland, who I think has shown a lot of strength, especially after that tragic collapse of the bridge in Baltimore. Amazing comeback was made in Baltimore, bridge back in action. He's done something great there. Army veteran, very impressive guy. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan has shown in a tough swing state that she can win, and took on Republicans head on a variety of issues and was able to make some real change in that state, including on something I care about a lot, early childhood education. She's been a leader on that. Look, Gavin Newsom obviously has built something national in terms of fighting back against the extremism of Republicans. He's someone who's going to be a major part of any picture here. And that's just a few. There are others. Andy Beshear is really interesting in Kentucky, who's handled natural disasters in a way that I think has gained real bipartisan respect and comes from a pure red state and keeps winning as a Democrat. I mean, these are really interesting people, all governors, which is, I think, a model we should lean into because governors actually know how to get something done.
What do you think of AOC? Do you think she is too extreme to unite the country?
I don't think she's too extreme. I think she has focused on sort of big ideas, big message, and approaching the world from the position of a legislator. I think she's done a great job, for example, on issues like climate, pushing for real change. I mean, she's one of the people that I think played a major role in us getting the climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the most important climate legislation in the history of this country. I think that's been her strength, to work from the legislative side and kind of rallying the American people to ideas. I don't know if she is looking for an executive role, honestly. She might be a strong candidate, but I think what's clear right now is we do have a group of candidates who have won in major states, who are running big states, who have proven they can get a lot done, and by definition had to build that bigger coalition. And so I'd like to see a progressive who can create that broad coalition.
Do you think we're watching Cory Booker clearly positioning himself for a run?
I assume that's what he's trying to do. Now, I have a lot of respect for Senator Booker, and his speech, I think, moved a lot of people. he and I were in the same class that ran in 2019 into the 2020 election. And, both of us didn't get where we wanted to go. So I think that's sobering always. But I assume he was trying to put himself back in the mix, and he certainly did himself a favor with that powerful speech.
I want to ask about Newsom. We see him launching his new podcast. Clearly, he is trying to position himself as more moderate. He is inviting people onto the podcast that some on the left are criticizing him for even speaking with, which is interesting. Will he ever be able to rid himself of his California connections, this very left-wing state that is seen as so woke, so extreme, so off the rails by so many Americans on the right? I mean, is he dead in the water by that association?
Natasha, I appreciate your question because you don't mince words. So I commend you as a journalist for asking it bluntly. California is not a left-wing state. If you actually look at a lot of the decisions he's made, he's much more mainstream than I think a lot of people recognize. But to your question, look, I do think that's something he's going to have to answer in a profound way. I think it is tough to come from a coastal state, and be identified with a certain reality and assume that people are going to look the other way on that. No, he has to answer it, right? He's going to have to come up with ideas and sort of proof, like any candidate, that he's a real agent of change. Now, I think he's extremely talented and he's accomplished a lot, especially on climate. I think he's got something to talk about. Look, doing the podcast is very smart on one level. I think a lot of people were a little concerned it was pretty abrupt. In other words, should we be talking to people with different views? Absolutely. I think that's something people do want. As I said, they want to end the division. But it seemed a little sudden and maybe a little uncritical. It's one thing to invite someone on that a lot of us disagree with, but maybe you got to be a little tougher on them in the process. So I'd say directionally, I think I understand what he was trying to do. Not sure the execution was what it could have been.
If the election were coming up in just a few weeks, which candidate would you be most excited to represent your party?
I'm not going to answer that as the blunt truth because it's way too early. I think I gave you some examples of people I think could really lead us very, very well. But I'll tell you something. I wish the election were coming up in the next few weeks. I mean it. It's like in Canada, the prime minister just called an election immediately because he's like, okay, like the world just turned. I'm grabbing onto this.
Things are different in Canada.
Things are different in Canada, but I'm saying in just 100 days, I would take my chances today with any of our candidates with the American people, because I think already Trump has poisoned the well for himself and the Republican Party. So, I'm like, bring it on. And I think any of the folks I mentioned, seriously, any of the folks I mentioned, if they have a strong economic message and they're just tough about their message and not like mincing words, like, again, deepest respect to Kamala Harris, but there was too much mincing of words. People want straight talk. Trump sounded in the 2024 election, he sounded like he was telling the truth about the pain that people are going through, even though I think he did not intend to address it. Honestly, I don't think he actually cared about everyday people, but he sounded pissed off. And Harris sounded satisfied and comfortable. Our candidate has to be pissed off that things are not good enough in America and we can make a change.
If you could whisper something into Trump's ear, what would it be?
That would be a rare moment, Natasha. He went out of the way at his cabinet meeting today to attack me. So,
what did he say? What did he say about you in his cabinet meeting, and how did that land?
Why in the cabinet meeting, especially? He said that because at one point I had had a fellowship at Harvard. That it was an example of what was wrong with Harvard and why they should defund Harvard. And he used me as an example. He also said that they paid me a massive salary. I wish that was true, Natasha. I never got that massive salary, so I hope they'll reconsider. But no, I think Trump doesn't listen, which is his nature. I mean, obviously, there are the Laura Loomers of the world who have captured his imagination, but in general, he doesn't listen. If you wanted to actually work in the interest of the American people, I'd say, try some bipartisanship and try not to govern just by, sudden moves and shock and symbolism and these kind of personal whims. But that's not going to happen. He is unleashed now compared to the first term. which looks positively mild, he's literally decided he has a full mandate. He can do whatever the heck he wants. And he does not have that mandate. That's the blunt reality. Even his own party on the tariff issue, you see a lot of people starting to push back. Doesn't have the mandate he thinks he has.
Let's talk about, in your eyes, opportunities you feel the Trump administration is giving to Democrats going forward. You mentioned tariffs. What about Elon Musk? Do you think there's an opportunity for Democrats there?
Of course. I mean, there's no precedent in our American history, 250 years, for the richest man in the country to be given the power of the government outright. I mean, he is literally being given access to all the information, being allowed to destroy government agencies before our eyes. Do you think the veterans of America think it's okay that the Veterans Administration is being decimated without anything being put in its place? These are people who served us and are hurting and need that help. This is not the kind of thing that doesn't come back around and boomerang on Trump and Musk. And worst thing of all, the guy who's doing it has no clue about life in America. I'm not even going to go there that he's not from America. I'm just going to go, he does not have any idea what average Americans are going through. He's a wealthy, out of touch, eccentric guy, if I want to be polite. And who the hell elected him? So I think this is the kind of thing that is sticking in the craw. I mean, I didn't even need the results in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race to tell me this, but boy, that was resounding.
Hmm.
Typically, if someone spends tens of millions of dollars, they get a decent result. He got thumped.
Do you think some of the crowds that we saw show up for Bernie Sanders and AOC was in direct opposition to Elon Musk?
Yes, I think it's a major factor. I mean, I think there would have been big crowds just on the strength of the negative things that Trump has done or the extreme things that Trump has done. But do I think Elon Musk is bringing out an additional anger and energy? Absolutely. And it's interesting. I think Elon Musk transcends Trump in a way. In other words, there are people who dislike Trump, and there's other people who are maybe more comfortable with Trump. But a lot of those folks, even comfortable with Trump, are questioning Elon Musk. I mean, we see it in the polling. A lot of Republicans are not, they did not sign up for an unelected, eccentric, crazed billionaire to have all this power. And I think Trump's in a box you can't easily get out of. You remember Vivek Ramaswamy was the person who was supposed to be equally in charge of Doge with Musk, but he made some
He,
comments
he
Trump
was
didn't
he was
like.
one of Doge's first
First,
casualties, I
right,
think.
exactly. They were very quick, but based on those comments he made, Trump could unload him without worrying that much. Musk has caused immense damage to Trump and to America. Trump's not even lifting a finger. In fact, he seems to be placating him. Why? He's the richest person in America. Trump understands that if Musk is alienated, he could turn Twitter against Trump. He could use his wealth against Trump. So, ironically, after all this bluster, Trump has put himself in a box by getting this close to Musk and not putting any limitation while he still could.
Mm. I mean, Musk was aligned with the Democratic Party at one point and very famously felt snubbed. He was not invited to a summit by Biden, and that was the moment that he started turning more towards Trump. And it's not just Musk. Have Democrats made a serious blunder in the way that they've alienated Silicon Valley?
No, I understand your point, and I will agree with you that, on climate in some ways because of electric vehicles, Musk seemed originally like someone that might align more with Democrats. On artificial intelligence, he's actually been a critical voice. On trade, as we see, he's saying things that are very different than Trump. So I think there was an argument there that he might have aligned with Democrats, but the problem was Democrats rightfully saw everything happening with big tech, and the American people have really turned against big tech. They really feel their privacy has been invaded, their data has been taken away, their children have been put in a bad way by social media and so many other factors for profit. So I think the Democratic Party got alienated from big tech because of big tech's own doing, honestly.
Hmm.
And Musk, also the way he approached Twitter. I think there are objective reasons why Democrats felt the way they did. Now, if you said in general in life, are there a million stories of someone who feels snubbed and goes over to the other side? Yup. And if you can avoid it, is it good politics? Yes. You don't let someone go away lightly, obviously. But I think there were really profound reasons why this happened.
What did you learn from running New York that you feel Democrats nationally still have not learned?
That people want money back in their pocket. Um, Very proud of the kinds of things we did in New York. We did free universal pre-K, and then we started to do the same for kids at the 3-year-old level. That was for every neighborhood, every kind of person, regardless of ideology or income. And folks loved it because it
Mm.
put money back in their pocket. You know, this town, you could pay $15,000 or more for one child to go to preschool if it's private. $15,000, a lot of money for people have that, taken out of their budget. Like most people just can't afford it. A lot of kids stayed home, got no education. We raised the minimum wage, which has obviously been popular in blue states and red states. The whole idea of looking at what people are living through and trying to answer it very materially. We did paid sick days. This is another thing that drives people crazy. They're trying to take care of their own health or their kids' health or their mom or dad's health, and they lose a day's pay. If Democrats consistently stood up for just the things I'm talking about, decent wages, paid sick days, free early childhood education, we'd blow away the Republicans everywhere.
Do you think one of the smartest things Trump ever did was sign his name so clearly at the bottom of the COVID stimulus checks?
Oh yeah, it was very smart. It was very smart. And it's not a fair world in politics. I mean, Republicans would never have the power they have in the House of Representatives if they didn't do gerrymandering, if they hadn't undercut voting rights laws and made it
Are
harder for
you
people to
saying
vote.
that Republicans fight dirty and
A
Democrats
hundred
need to
percent.
learn?
Yeah, Republicans fight dirty. Facts, absolute facts that Republicans fight dirty. Democrats cannot, sit back and just watch that happen. Signing a
What does
stimulus
that
check.
mean? Does that mean Democrats need to learn how to fight dirty, or does it
No, it
mean
doesn't
they
even
need
have
to
to be
call
dirty. Just
Republicans on it?
calling them on it doesn't do you anything. Use their same tools against them. Signing a stimulus check is not a sin. Like, I don't know what kind of, good government purist thinks it's a problem to sign a stimulus check or something. I think anytime you have an opportunity to do something like that, do it. But also, I mean, look, if they're going to take away valid representation by creating districts that are mangled just for political purposes, well, that's how they want to play the game. We should play that same way. It's just, let's be real. That famously, when Mitch McConnell stood in the way of Merrick Garland having an opportunity to become a Supreme Court justice, no Republican had ever done that before.
Hmm.
There's no way he should have gotten away with it. And if they're going to play that way, you got to lay down the same rules back at them until we get to the point of normalcy again. And where we were pre-Trump, especially, there was some decency, there were some rules. I actually think that's what people want to go back to.
Where does it stop, though? You're sort of saying open Pandora's box, and then we'll put it back in once things are back to normal.
Look, I do have faith, and I think the impulse of a lot of Democrats who do believe in democracy and do believe that every voice matters. We don't want this reality we're living right now. If you say, well, okay, we're going to use tough methods to get back to the political power that we can fix things, or then we're going to forget to fix things. No, I don't think so. I actually think it's philosophical. I think Republicans made a decision long ago, going way back to the Nixon Southern strategy in 1968, where they were willing to use racial division to win white votes in the South, or the Willie Horton ad that helped defeat Michael Dukakis in 1988. Republicans are comfortable using division as a tactic. They're comfortable breaking the rules. They're comfortable repressing people's right to vote to limit the electorate. Democrats are not going to do that. It's just not who we are. But if we have to use tough means to get back to a state of equilibrium, I think we should.
Where's the line for you?
The line is, of course, never do anything illegal and never, in my view, do anything immoral. Look, I think something like voting districts, for example, I would rather we actually had organic voting districts that reflected natural communities, and there was not a fear of which party was going to win, but actually districts that made sense from a human point of view. But in a world in which the other team just brazenly isn't doing that, so therefore the Congress doesn't even represent the American people, you got to level up the playing field to get to a Congress that actually represents what people feel. From there, you can build. I think that kind of, like, bring a knife to a knife fight is the right way to do things for now. Again, I think we're in a phase. We see the pendulum swing. We had McCarthyism once upon a time, and then we had the 60s as a response to it in part. We have Trumpism now. There's going to be a response to that. This is going to, in my view, the Trump project's going to fail really badly, and people are going to want to go back to equilibrium.
Are you worried about Trump running for a third term or
I
securing
am.
a third term?
I'm not worried about him securing a third term. I'm worried about him trying to get a third term. I think the good news is he's burning that bridge every day. But do I think he's going to try it? Do I think he's willing to run over the Constitution? Absolutely. Look, I think we can already see the script. They're being pretty blunt about it. They just will start a campaign and act like it's normal. And then there'll, of course, be court challenges. And then even if a court says you can't do that, they'll keep going. And then they'll try and get it to the Supreme Court, hoping the Supreme Court will somehow say, oh, we misread the Constitution. Now it is okay. Maybe the Supreme Court has the indignity to do it. I actually don't think they do. I think the Supreme Court has actually put down a few limits that they will stick to. I don't think they're going to allow, for the first time in American history, someone to violate the Constitution in that manner. But I think Trump will try, and people have to fight back. But I'd actually much rather be ready to beat him in any scenario than depend on the Supreme Court to do the right thing.
What are your thoughts about a JD Vance presidency in the future? And in your mind, would he be worse than Trump, and why?
I don't know if he'd be worse, because I don't think he bluntly has the political talent and messaging talent that Trump has. Even if I find it detestable, I got to give him credit that Trump has some secret sauce. I don't think JD Vance has that. I think JD Vance is so openly hypocritical. And obviously, everything said about Trump once upon a time, as he's suddenly erased from memory. He was very anti-Trump until he was totally pro-Trump. I don't think he's that kind of person who can be believable to the American people. So on that level, I don't fear him. What I fear is he is willing to fake it. To say he's going to be about working people, and to some extent, folks might fall for that. But no, I don't think he is as formidable. And I think after 4 years of Trump, there's not going to be an appetite for more. And I'm not just saying that as a partisan Democrat. I'm saying it because I just see what's happening to people. The chaos has only begun. When folks don't get their Social Security checks, when it's harder to get health care, when veterans don't get their services, when the prices keep going up, when folks lose their jobs, all the seeds have already been planted. They are not going to be ready for more of that.
From where you're sitting right now, and I have a feeling that you have to say this, are you optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party? What are you going to say, Mr. Mayor?
No,
What are
I am.
you...
You don't even have to question it. I am. Look, I'm an optimist by nature, or else I wouldn't have had the insanity to be mayor of New York City. If you can, to even want that job, you better be an optimist. But to come out of it and not be insane, I must be an optimist. But the reality is, I am, because the mistakes were so much of our own making. And this is kind of a funny human reality. If so much of what's wrong is something that you did yourself and you can address, if you just acknowledge it and you're honest about it, you can address it. Well, that's actually, in a strange way, encouraging.
Mm.
This was not like, oh, the country became radically conservative, so it's all over for us. No. I mean, we've had a bunch of close elections for a generation or two now. But clearly, if you look issue by issue, Democrats actually represent the majority view. Like I said, women's right to choose, Democrats represent the majority. Fair, responsible gun safety laws, Democrats represent the majority. Taxes, fairer taxes on the wealthy, making sure the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, Democrats absolutely represent the majority. So I go down a list and say, okay, well, we have the majority views. How are we not winning? Well, we're not winning because we're not running the right candidates sometimes. We're not running the right campaigns. We don't have a clear message. Again, we have to get away from our own elites and go back to the people.
Do you think Democrats underestimate how much the culture of elite liberalism really turns off such an enormous part of this country?
100%. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily a Democrat who came up with the phrase flyover country, but I've always been deeply offended by that phrase. I happen to have one grandparent who was born in Iowa and one grandparent who was born in Ohio. So it's personal for me in that level too. But no, we got to stop this whole tendency to let the limousine liberals, as they used to be called, sort of be the voices of the party. I never thought a limousine liberal had anything to do with addressing the needs of working people. I mean, anyone who seems comfortable and satisfied with the status quo doesn't represent the Democratic Party I know. We got to fight for people. And I think we can. Absolutely. I think, even things like wrapping ourselves in celebrity, which, Obama did it, and to some extent it worked for him, and then it stopped working for him. Hillary did it. I don't know why. Kamala Harris then did it after everyone else did it, and it didn't work. It's like the people don't want to see you hanging with celebrities or hanging with rich donors or seeming like everything's okay.
Stop with the Oprah or the Beyonce or anyone else. No more of that for the Democratic Party, you're saying.
It's not how you win elections. Spend time with people. Ken Martin, our new Democratic chair, is out there in backyards and knocking on doors, and he's at work sites where people are. That's what we need to do again. That was what we did for generations. It works. Go back to the people, and Republicans cannot follow. I know that everyone says, "Oh, J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley are sounding like they're pro-labor," but they're not pro-labor when it comes to actually voting and setting policies. And Democrats are historically in favor of the needs of working people. So let's go out there and just bring it to people. Democrats gave up on too many parts of this country. We stopped even running candidates in many parts of the country for local offices. And folks can tell and they can feel when you're not investing in them anymore. One of the things Ken Martin talks about is reinvigorating state Democratic parties and running. Literally, there'll be a Democrat running for every open seat for everything in America.
Mayor Bill de Blasio, thank you.
Natasha, great conversation. Wide ranging, to say the least.
Wide ranging indeed. Thanks for playing ball.
Of course. Take care now.